Our focus today is going to be on decoupled content and how it moves through the supply chain. Within the lab today, we've been working on content supply chains within our clients and internally. And we're going to take a look at this Opus reference architecture. And it really is the same kind of architecture that we're innovating with clients in multiple industries like healthcare, life sciences, financial technology, software, and in consumer product companies, all of whom have the need to build and unify a set of content experiences from shared content assets. So let's talk about content supply chains in general, or just even supply chains in general, and get an understanding of the fundamentals and why it makes sense to invest in them. So you're probably familiar with the manufacturing supply chain. In society right now, the public is discovering just how important these supply chains are. Physical resources are sourced and transformed into components, and the components are shipped and transformed again into final products. By focusing on the individual steps at one time, enterprises take a lean approach to optimizing the different stages of the supply chain. So if you had to use different components to create the same final set of products, would you create a separate supply chain for each product team? And it would be crazy to do that, but that's what we do in content, right? We have separate supply chains, even though the components are fundamentally the same. We are investing at an asset level from the CEO on down in our physical supply chains. It is understood that it makes sense to work on a supply chain for physical goods. What we need to do is get that same understanding translated. And we're doing this with our champions, our middle tier champions, the directors, senior directors, VPs that are championing up content into the C-suite. We'd like to have more C-suite conversations as well, really demonstrating the asset value of content supply chains working across the enterprise with shared patterns in order to deliver the benefits of the network effect of content. Just like we're developing the network effect of shared data meshes inside of enterprises. The same thing is needed for content. So that really involves dealing with the supply chain thinking and with asset-based thinking across a portfolio. We can build a supply chain in a department, and we've done it. It needs to start somewhere. It's not a bad way to start, but the thinking needs to be built towards integrated models, integrated content models, integrated semantic models, so that we're unifying knowledge and content types across pre- and post-sales experiences. There's different stages of content. We've simplified it down to acquire, annotate, enrich, store, and manage, and deliver. In some of our clients, there can be 16, 17 steps in life cycles. In some organizations, just the regulatory and compliance piece is itself a giant piece. But largely, a lot of those can be subset into these major components. We're going to walk through briefly what those are. Content is originating from many people and places. It's not starting in a single system, right? It's not just in Word or Markdown or a particular structured content tool. We've seen and have been working with Adobe Suite and Oxygen and Hereto and Fonto and many of the other tools that are being innovated across the authoring landscape. There's a lot of CMS vendors that have really, and CCMS vendors that have really good authoring environments. We've seen headless vendors that have good authoring environments too. And those are all good options, but those are all acquisition strategies. We need to look at those acquisition strategies not as monolithic, but as plural. There's multiple acquisitions, and they all need to share the same structure. We're going to talk about content structure because it's the way content supply chains work. If we don't unify our content structure, we just definitionally cannot unify our content supply chain. Content supply chains are not integration projects. I'll say that again. Content supply chains are not integration projects. Why the world largely looks at content supply as an integration project is still baffling, because in most other parts of enterprise IT, everything else moves as objects, as data. But content often is just seen as a point-to-point integration. It needs to be seen as a service-oriented flow of decoupled, structured elements. It's the only way we're going to get to this multi-channel future of assembly and content recommendation. It's the only way. So content structure is the path to the agility we seek. And we at A organize around a core content model, which is a single integrated information model, aggregating all the different representations of content into a single abstract model that facilitates interoperability of content types and their elements across the systems, and also across the different standards, whether that's DITA or schema.org or healthcare specific standards, that where content needs to be structured in a certain way to connect to certain systems. And those all need to integrate into that core content model. At this stage, content comes packaged from the authoring team, and that might be a single file, kind of file format, documents, or collection of information in fields. We use a standard process here to automate and transform content from its acquisition format and break the content into its component pieces, if it's not already componentized, into those elements that map to our model. And then we can add our localization details, our metadata, run any pre-processing that the content needs to get into a unified form in the next stage of our management systems. Semantics is one of the most transformative aspects of creating intelligent content. And again, we can't get into semantics today, but it's how we tag our content and connect it with our data. It's so, so important, and it needs to be part of our supply chains. Then we need to store and manage that content. So it's coming together from multiple sources, a CMS, a DAM, a knowledge management system, a content services platform, and they all share a common structure. So there's different physical stores, but they all share a common approach to accessing the data within them. So our brothers and sisters on the data side have been working on object-oriented interoperable data sets. They call it a data mesh. This is the kind of thing we need to do in content, standards-based interoperable content sets. So we can do that. In the content industry, we're able to do this. And in many organizations we're working with, the seeds of this are already well on the way. We need to maintain our modularity, all of those ingredients for remixing, reusing, renovating, repurposing our content so it's not a single artifact, okay? Then we can call content into services to do work. This is where we're in delivery. And this is where we need to allow our content to be managed by multiple kinds of customer experiences and engagement tools, and get remixed. It can be the primary API broker. This can be a set of technologies that share a common approach to API calls. That ability to deliver experiences requires the capacity for that content to be tagged semantically so that it can be assembled semantically, queried semantically as well, by topic, not just by topic and tag, by customer need, by intent, not just by keyword. All right, the future is not keyword oriented, it's semantics. All right, the business case for the content supply chain is its own webinar, but I do want to plant one seed, which is the cost per content transformation. We know that content supply chains can increase cost efficiency by 2 to 10 times. I mean, we've seen a massive, dramatic improvements. We had one client spending over 60% of their SME's time just on content transformation, and these are SMEs getting paid over, 6 figures a year. So it's incredibly expensive to have manual processes, and a lot of it's buried. So what is the cost per content transformation? We've found some content types requiring more than $5,000 worth of effort per item per transformation, right? So when you start looking at publishing hundreds of items, it starts to get very expensive. And a lot of it's totally hidden cost. So adding that cost just gets up into the millions of dollars a year, and that easily justifies content supply chain efforts just on the cost side. But executives also really understand the ability to expand capabilities, right? If we can make more content experiences happen faster, we can get more offers into more hands and respond to market events in a faster way and deal with more markets and opportunities. That it just makes everybody strategically more viable, which really increases, we're starting to look at situations that start to increase organizational agility, right? So content supply chains are very, very significant. There are others working on content supply chains, and I did want to acknowledge a really great white paper written by Mike Iantosca last year that is a really very, very compelling overview. He calls it From Micro Content to Neurons, and it's a good overview of content supply chains and how they work. It deals with a lot of the concepts we're talking about here. There's resources on simpleA.com that deal with supply chains as well. We've seen from RWS and other vendors interest in content supply chains and in innovating the methodology around it. I would invite others in the industry to bring their voices and their research and their experiments into the public conversation and share what you're doing.